So the Realme GT2 Pro or the Realme GT, the cheaper model, which sells for, at the time of this video, about 200 euros less, but still offers quite a lot. It's powered by the Snapdragon 888 instead of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 like the GT2 Pro. It still has the same 50 megapixel camera, which is our main camera, the IMX766, and a 5000 mAh battery and 65 watt charging. The screen on this one is slightly smaller at 6.6 inches, but it's still 120 Hz. It's still a bright AMOLED panel. So the difference in the price, is it actually worth it to go for the cheaper model here if you don't need a higher quality ultra-wide or that top of the line latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 1? Let's find out in this comparison and review of the Realme GT2 versus the GT2 Pro.
And what do you find in the box with both of the phones? Well, we do get this thin TPU case that covers the phone perfectly. It's not really offering a lot of protection because of how thin it is, but it does cover the volume buttons and the power button. Now, both of them have 5000 mAh batteries, and they both use the exact same charger, which is their Super Dart charger, 65 watts, and the same exact cable. Now, charge time, in my experience with both of them, is always around about 30 minutes. So 29 minutes, 28, 30, 31, you get the idea. It's always about or approximately 30 minutes, which is very quick for a 5000 mAh battery. Looking at the build and the design of them both side by side here, they look very similar, but you'll notice that the camera module is a little slimmer on the GT2, which is on the left. I'll always keep it on the left, and the GT2 Pro will always be on the right, so we don't get confused, and I don't get confused here. So the material on the back, they both use that biopolymer paper-like finish, which is very nice. I am a real big fan of this because it doesn't pick up any fingerprints or smudges. Some people might not like it, however, because it doesn't quite feel as premium as having, say, Gorilla Glass 5 or Victus on the back of it. So with our cameras here, we've got the same 50 megapixel main camera on both of these, and they both take the exact same photo. As you imagine, the software optimization with the camera and the color science, very similar, almost spot on. I can't tell any difference between them. Later on, I will focus a little bit more on the cameras. So we've got a 50 megapixel camera here in the GT2 Pro for the ultra wide with a 150 degree field of view, which is huge. It's very wide for especially a mobile phone. It's 15 millimeters. A 3 megapixel microscopic camera. So with the GT2 here, they cheaped out on the ultra wide and just gave us an 8 megapixel one. And it's not amazing. I'll give you some samples later on. And then a 2 megapixel macro camera. Otherwise, very, very similar. Now, there are some differences when you take a look at the frames. Side on here, we've got our power on button, okay, made out of metal on both of them there, and the frame is a metal frame on the GT2 Pro, whereas this one has plastic over the top of an alloy inner frame on the GT2, which still feels very good, very solid, I must add there with this one. Now, the thickness of it, you're looking at here at approximately 8.6 millimeters versus 8.2, so slightly thinner the GT2 Pro, and yes, in hand it feels just a bit more premium, and it is a little heavier. This one is around about 190 grams versus about 199 grams. So they have a bit of a difference there in the weight because of the materials used. The more metal in the more premium model, it does kind of make sense. Then when you look on the left side here, you see there's a difference with the power buttons. You can see the antenna lines with the metal build, but you don't see the antenna line gap because the plastic goes right over the top of that alloy inner frame. So it's separate buttons here, and they both feel very good. Fingerprint reader location, different here too as well. I like it better on the GT2 Pro because you can get to it a lot easier. Now, they both work exceptionally well, no problems at all. You can see they're very quick to unlock. And then there is a difference in the screen tech, of course, too, with both of these, that we do have an LTPO2 screen here with a 1440p resolution maximum on the GT2 Pro, and you can see the bezels do look a lot better, a little bit slimmer. There's not that much of a difference, and personally, I don't think people are going to be too fussed about the difference between these two displays. So just Full HD Plus versus QHD Plus. With the GT2 here, the screen is still 120 Hz refresh rate, exactly the same as this one. And then we've got a 16 megapixel front-facing camera there versus a 32. And again, I can't actually see that much of a difference in them unless you pixel peep and get in really close. You can see slightly more details captured on the more expensive model there. Now, the UI performance is something I'm going to go over very quick here because they both run Realme UI 3.0. They both feel exactly the same, very quick. I've not had any issues with it. The optimization, they've got down really well. I think the experience from the team that used to work in Oxygen OS and then Color OS and then Realme UI here, it's very good. So recent apps, they all come up and you can swap over very quickly on both of them. And I really don't see any difference, and they do load in really quick. We have a lot of different features that I won't go over with the ROM here, but you can set up and customize a lot of options here with the displays on both. Just to talk a little bit more about them, that we do have, this one's a more power efficient screen, so later on I'll get onto the battery life, but we have the same options with them, okay? So you can adjust and set there the white balance, you've even got the image sharpener, color enhancement, and motion enhancement modes. The refresh rate you can override. Now, I've always kept it on 120 Hz for the purposes of my testing and my review here. I just prefer to have that better speed with both of them. So excellent displays. You're looking at around 1300 nits maximum versus with this guy right here, about 1400 that it can peak at. Now that's peak. When I measure them right now, I'm looking at very similar brightnesses, around 900 nits versus about 920, 30 or so. So really quite similar. And you can see they're just looking at them. I don't think anyone's going to really have a problem. If you must have 1440p, then of course the more expensive model is the one to go for there. And when you look at the bottoms of the phone here, exactly the same layout. So the microphone, loudspeaker here, they do have dual loudspeakers. The earpiece has another one. And then, of course, the mic's there and the SIM trays. So both of them take dual nano SIMs. There is no micro SD card support on both of these models. At the top, there is no IR blaster here. We just have the secondary mics for noise cancellation used in voice call and for video to capture stereo sound. Both of them do run that Realme UI 3.0, and it's all based off Android 12. Now, in my experience, Android 12 has been a little bit buggy on other phones like the OnePlus 10 Pro, the Xiaomi 12, and the Xiaomi 12 Pro, and other phones. But here, Realme seems to have done a really good job with the ROM. And what else is very good is this, the bloatware that's included. You're only looking at about 4 or 5 bloatware applications, which is excellent considering other manufacturers. The brands from China, like Xiaomi, would put on maybe even 10, 15 apps that are bloatware-ish and a lot of junky games and things that you have to uninstall. But that doesn't happen with Realme, as you can see. That's, well, just Facebook, Amazon, Booking.com, LinkedIn. That is really it for bloatware, so that's great, and I hope they keep this up. So as I did mention before, the charge time on both of these is the same because it's the same super dart charging 65 watts. And you'll see there's a slight difference in the battery level when I did charge, so from 9% to 100%, and then 10 to 100% on both of them was exactly the same, 29 minutes. It sometimes takes 31, it will sometimes take 28 minutes. It really depends on the day. But very quick charging, considering other brands at 120 watts will take 20 minutes. This is really only, or 21 minutes, this is really only about 8 or 9 minutes longer that you have to wait. And it's at, well, just over half the rate of them that it's charging at. So that is excellent. Now, internal storage speeds on both of them, very good. And both of these models here I do have the 12 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage UFS 3.1 spec. So you can see here that in some areas that it's actually faster on the cheaper model. And it's just the luck of the draw really when it comes to sequential read. That's a bit faster, quite a bit faster. However, the important one is, of course, your writes. And, well, most important is the random reads and writes. And you'll see they are faster on the more expensive Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 model here versus the Snapdragon 888 we have on that model. But both of them, excellent speeds on the storage. You really cannot go wrong there. And look at this. There is hardly any difference at all. We're looking at approximately 103,000 point difference. And look at the difference. Where is it? It's mostly in the GPU score and then the memory speeds. That is it. So the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888, the last gen flagship chipset versus the new one now here, it's not a huge step up. It's mostly just the graphics department. That's it. You can see the CPU score is even a bit higher on the cheaper GT2. So really, even with gaming performance I'll get onto later on, it's basically the same. And when you use these phones, the UI, everything feels exactly the same. So I did notice a bit of a difference here between when you run Wildlife, the stress test, this goes for 20 minutes, and how much they throttle. This shows us that the more powerful the Gen 1 chip here, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, does throttle a little more to be expected there, and of course a better score, quite a bit higher. But they've throttled down quite a bit on both of these. There are hot chips, the Snapdragon 888 and that 8 Gen 1 there. And you'll see here that the temperatures went on both of these models here from 23 degrees, so one was 29 up to 46 and 44 there. So they do increase in temperature. Of course, it's a very demanding test, this one. It really pushes the phones hard. So that result is okay, but it is not the best I've seen out of other phones that run Snapdragon 888s or the 8 Gen 1 there. So they do pass, well, this is interesting. It doesn't pass the SafetyNet test here, the GT2, and I'm not sure why that is. It's the CTS profile match is a fail, okay? So that needs to be fixed. Hopefully, firmware update will correct that. But the GT2 Pro there does have the pass, so that's an unusual one. They both do have wideband level 1, so that's great. That means Netflix is, yes, working in full HD. Amazon Prime Video isn't. That's because Amazon needs to update their whitelist that they run for approved devices, which neither of these phones here are featured. So you've got Camera 2 API support on both of them. If you want to mess about with, say, Open Camera or Gcam, you can do that with the full support there, gaining complete access to the cameras without needing to have root access on both of them, which is handy. GPS, very similar on both, and I would call it a definite draw here. They see one of them sees and locks onto a little more there, as you can see with the Snapdragon 888. But again, that just depends on when I was doing it there, so not really any difference there to worry yourself about. Now, battery life, this is where we do have a bit of a difference. And why is it so massive? Well, that's because I ran 1440p, so QHD plus resolution versus Full HD plus meant that the GT2, the battery life on it is actually very good. It's a solid phone. Now, that's a fixed battery life test, so it's not real world, but at least it's running the same thing over and over again until it gets to 20% battery. Both the displays were calibrated at 200 nits of brightness, so it's safe to say you're looking around 8.5 to 9 hours on screen time with just light use on the GT2 Pro, whereas with this model, you're looking at about 10 to 11 hours of light use. So that's social media. I'm just talking about being in, say, Twitter, WhatsApp messages, things like that. That's very easygoing on both of the phones and the battery. Now, if you, of course, run a higher brightness and you game a little, then expect that battery life to then plummet. But both of these phones, they will make it, even on 120 hertz refresh rate, through a full day, which is absolutely fantastic. How about the audio quality then? Is there a difference between them? So voice calls, it sounds identical to me. I can't really tell a difference. And also the Type-C to 3.5mm output on both. So they don't have 3.5mm headphone jacks, but using that adapter, it sounds the same. I think they've just got it set completely the same software, the same optimization there. What about the speakers then? So I do have both of them set to 100% volume, and they're dual loudspeakers, so the sound comes out the earpiece right here, then those bottom speakers. So I'll first play the GT2 and then the GT2 Pro with the same exact track, and we'll have a listen to which one sounds better. Is there any difference, or are they exactly the same? Now that's interesting. While they both sound the same, it's pretty flat. There's not a huge amount of bass in these speakers, and the loudness is good on them. I do hear that this one, from where I'm sitting, does sound a fraction louder than the more expensive GT2 Pro. Gaming performance now. So when you take a look here at the GT2 Pro, which has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, average frames per second in this same area at the moment is around 50, 60 frames per second. Now, once it starts to heat up, that does drop down to the 40s. So I've just got this one save point right here in the middle. What I'll do now is I'll test it out on the GT2. We'll see the frame rate. Is it going to be similar? You can see that with the GT2 now that it's down to sometimes 42 frames per second and looking around here, 35. Now in town with the lighting at the moment at nighttime, it's quite demanding and just as demanding as being out fighting any bosses. So just quickly trigger a fire there and 47, 54. So it is slightly lower the performance here as expected because the GPU is a bit weaker with the GT2 versus that more powerful GT2 Pro. I'm going to now game for an hour on both of them and we'll check back on the thermals. All right, so first up here is the GT2, and this is after now 28 minutes of game. You can see the back's getting up to 41 degrees Celsius. So yes, it gets a little warm where the Snapdragon 888 is. On the front, it's reaching, you can see about 43 there that it did peak up, almost 44 degrees. Now let's take a look here at then the GT2 Pro. And the front of this, it's up to, well, similar temperatures there. You can see about 43, possibly almost towards 44 degrees. That's the front of the phone now. This is after 28 minutes of gaming. And then the back of it, about 42 there, 41 or so, peaking at. So very similar temperatures. And both of these do seem to have quite good thermals, even playing demanding games. They tend to get around, I've seen the hottest it get up to is 46 degrees, and that is still short compared to other phones that are getting up to around about 50, like the OnePlus 10 Pro or the Xiaomi 12. And moving over to our cameras now with the Realme GT2. The difference is with the front-facing camera, this one's 16 megapixels, but you don't actually really notice the difference too much between the GT2 Pro and then this one when it comes to the front-facing cameras. We only have 1080p front vlog footage, so it can't do 4K unfortunately. Then the rear cameras, let's take a look at those now. We have the same IMX766 with the optical image stabilization, electronic image stabilization. You can shoot 4K, 3060, and you can't shoot 8K with this model. So you can shoot 8K with the GT2 Pro if you do need 8K footage. It's only 24 frames per second. So this camera really exactly the same, the footage that you get out of it and the stills, because it's the same main sensor and it seems to have the same software optimization. The real difference is the ultra wide. This ultra wide is only 8 megapixels and it does have electronic image stabilization, whereas with the GT2 Pro you have a 50 megapixel camera that can shoot 4K, 60 and 30, much better image quality than this one, which tends to look a little bit washed out. The ultra wide I do find disappointing. I really wish they'd gone for a 13 or 16 megapixel camera with slightly better quality than this. And then of course there is that 2 megapixel ultra macro camera, and you've got the 3 megapixel microscopic camera with the GT2 Pro. So those are the differences there. Now audio bitrate, it's 28 kilobits per second, which is actually higher than the 96 kilobits per second with the GT2 Pro.
And my conclusion here, I really do think that the GT2 is a fantastic offering. Sure, it doesn't have the 50 megapixel ultra wide that the GT2 Pro has, or quite as good gaming performance, but it is still excellent. It still has a very good Full HD Plus display in it, the GT2. And you can't really see that much of a difference between QHD Plus and then Full HD Plus unless you look at both of the screens really closely, and you can see, okay, yeah, All right, the GT2 Pro's QHD display does seem a little bit sharper, but most people really, it's a difference that really I don't think anyone's going to be worried about. So it still is a very fast, quick phone. The UI, and I've got both of them with the same amount of RAM, both with the same storage capacity. I'm not seeing any difference there at all when it comes to the UI performance. It's very quick. And then when you look at the Antutu score, if you do like that benchmark, it's only about 100 or just over 100,000 points difference between the Snapdragon Gen 1, 8 Gen 1, and then the 888. Really not a huge difference at all. Now, front-facing cameras, yes, we've got 16 megapixels versus 32, but again, in the real-world use there, you don't see too much of a difference. So that would be, and is, my pick. Save yourself 200 euros, 449 versus 649 for the entry-level base models of both of these with the early bird price. I think you should save the 200 euros and get yourself the Realme GT2. So thanks a lot for watching my comparison here of the GT2 Pro, which has its own separate full review of it, but I've covered most of it in this video already. And this is basically the review of the GT2 here. Both of these are fantastic phones. You can't go wrong with either of them. Thanks a lot for watching. I do hope to see you back in the next one. Bye for now.